Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success.
I came up with a concept of how to do a major horizontal spanning member that would span twice as long as the typical product. And this is called dual deck.
Get ready to meet Robert Finfrock, chairman of Finfrock and a third-generation leader of the family business. Finfrock is the nation's largest builder of parking structures with over 27 million square feet completed. With a legacy of innovation and prestressed concrete, 7 patents, and a comprehensive design-build approach, Robert has propelled the company by delivering landmark projects that emphasize efficiency and sustainability. Welcome, Bob Finfrock. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Scott.
Excellent. So I'd like to just start off by kind of figuring out if you could tell us what you do, the company that you have, that you lead, and we'll start from there.
Okay, we'll do it. We are design builders of multi-story buildings of various kinds. We've been noted for many years for building parking structures, which actually encompass a lot of different markets. We have built between 300 and 400 parking garages in our past. We also do many other multi-story buildings, I would call occupied buildings, like apartment buildings, offices, hotels, student housing. Those are typically in the range of 6 or 7 up to maybe 14 stories is our sweet spot. And in that role, we act as architect, engineer, general contractor, and we have been in the precast, prestressed concrete manufacturing business since inception of the company back in 1945. So all of our structures are built from precast, prestressed concrete.
So wait a minute. So, but 1945, that was your father?
That's right.
Okay.
I'm not that old, but I actually am.
Of course not. Of course not.
When he started in 1945, I was 2, to give you an idea. So anyway,
so did you always know this is the road you wanted to go down? Was that always the plan?
Yeah, it was my plan. I became intrigued with the engineering aspects of the structural materials all the way back when I was a kid, probably in the late 1940s, when I was observing and wondering what was happening. He started down on a little half-acre piece of property very near downtown Orlando. And it was, went through some very interesting times and got my interest up to pursue an engineering education, which I did. Got out in 1965, and I had been here ever since. So I'm 59 years full-time. Worked as a teenager before that. So this company has kind of been part of me since I was 2 years old.
So here's what's interesting is that I want to say before my son was born, call it 18, 19 years ago, Finfrock as a name came into my consciousness. My wife is an architect over Universal Studios, and we were driving downtown somewhere, and she literally said, "Look what they're doing. They are pouring concrete literally on site, and in some ways, and they were kind of tilting the walls up, or you were building everything right there." And
we produced the product, the main product of the building. The only thing we pour in place are the foundations. Everything above foundations is precast, prestressed concrete built at our manufacturing plant.
And you were, but from her perspective, you were building these garages in days. Like it was poured, and then the things would show up, and then boom, 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 and it was done. And it almost felt like magic. It happened so quickly. Typically, those things are multi. From my perspective, they take months and months and months. You were doing it like a week or something crazy amount of time like that.
Actually, what we on our buildings, and whether they're parking or occupied buildings, we typically complete those in about 2/3 the time or so of conventional construction, which is a big help to a developer or building owner because he can receive income sooner, and also because we're all a in-house operation, where all these different functions are, we probably do maybe a dozen businesses that are normally standalone and all incorporated under one roof here. And that does phenomenal things for coordination, speed, quality, and that type of thing. And so it really has, that business model has really taken off in the last really 30 years for us, and particularly in the last 10 years since we developed a new building system called Dual Deck that is responsible for our penetration into all those other markets other than parking.
So what's interesting, the last time we spoke, you had said that at one point in time it was a little bit disparate, right? Your architect wasn't necessarily the person who worked for you. They were all kind of all over the place, and they were typically contractors. And there was a point where you just kind of made the decision to bring it all in-house under one roof. When did that happen, and what made that decision?
It happened in very slow stages. And if I had to give anyone advice, you'd make it happen sooner. But I remember I graduated from Vanderbilt with an engineering degree in 1965. And it wasn't long into, I remember this because I found an old calendar that I dug out somewhere, and it reminded me of what I was doing at the time. And I thought to myself, even at 6 months employment here, maybe, I said, this industry is a bunch of fragmented businesses that are each acting in their own self-interest, and sub-optimizing would be the word that I've used since then. Probably didn't know that word back then. And that just doesn't seem efficient. And that was probably my vision of where I wanted to go. But the chances of getting there were slim and almost none. So it took a long time to do it, because you had to gather those maybe dozen businesses that you had to conquer that were then operated as standalone businesses. This creates all kinds of fragmentation in the industry that the customer of the industry, the person buying the building, has to suffer with. And it's sad that this happens. That's what I set out to correct. And it took all those years to do it. We did our first design build job in 1976, I think it was, but we didn't really get into it about 1996, to where that became our focal point. That became our actual business that we totally relied on. But prior to that, it was selling precast, prestressed concrete to others, to general contractors that we weren't the general contractor, promoting with architects and so forth. So it's been a major change, and others in the precast concrete industry are not really doing this. And I don't know why, because to me, it's much more pleasurable way to do business. And it is for our customers too.
I would imagine that the problem, right, would be the architect's motivation is not your motivation, and your motivation is the thing that I guess is the best for your company is not necessarily the best for the 12 other businesses that were all disparate, not under one roof, right? And by bringing it in, you're able to add real value. But I guess our last discussion, we had talked about something along the lines of the moment you're able to really do a consulting role where you're saying, hey, look, let's build this building first so you can start making money. Right. So you're sort of aligning motivations with the actual person who's paying to build stuff. And then lo and behold, why would they go anywhere else? Because you've got everything in-house.
Right. Without causing criticism to all the fragmented businesses that operate in the construction industry. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, other than there's a better way to do it. And what happens is the end customer, the owner of the building, their perception is that they have to get 3 bids on everything, or however many. And that doesn't necessarily cause innovation to happen. In other words, if one person sees the end result that's necessary or desirable, then it's a lot easier for one company to make that happen. And that's what we have gradually done over the years, and to where we have a competitive advantage in that area, in the areas we practice. We don't practice in every area, but the ones we do, we can be highly assured that you're going to be competitive, and hopefully a lot more than competitive. In other words, offer more value. People purchase because of value. And that's what we try to maximize.
So we'd also talked about a hotel you had built years ago. And the reason, if I remember correctly, you had built it almost as a proof of concept. Can we kind of talk about that just for a bit? Because that absolutely
Yeah.
fascinates me.
Now, we did a lot over the years. We did a lot of structural building systems. First, we started with products and then assembled them into structural building materials. And we did warehouses and manufacturing buildings and stadiums. And we got to parking. And that was about, we dabbled in it before this, but about 1985 when that really started as a precast concrete product. And we got to where we built so many of them that we kind of knew the whole game. And this is when about 1996 we decided we're being commoditized by having to give away our value to bid on a project with our ideas. And this became not a profitable idea. So by the time we also did other buildings, but we weren't really competitive in them. And so about 2005, I came up with a concept of how to do a major horizontal spanning member that would span twice as long as the typical product. And this is called dual deck. We ended up naming our building system after that. So it took about 10 years of development and quite a bit of money to do this. But it's turned out to be revolutionizing the other areas besides parking, as I mentioned earlier, office, hotel, apartment, student housing. And this is where it's really taken off. Well, once we developed this product for 10 years, it was a time finally, after lots of research and development, to sell the product. And we said, this is going to be difficult. Never done it before. And this exact product and building system. In the meantime, we'd also developed our abilities to do 3D modeling. That started in the late 90s. And we realized the advantages that could give a building system to not have the fragmented, fight it out in the field, so to speak, methods of constructing. Put it all in a 3D model ahead of time, and now you got something. So a combination of this dual deck product, the horizontal product, and 3D modeling produced what we call the dual deck building system. And we needed a way to demonstrate it so that it wasn't the first time we didn't want to be a guinea pig for somebody. And so we decided, we happened into a piece of property down in Naples, right in downtown Naples on water. And we had to piece together some stuff. So we became a developer of this hotel. And that changed the game. We were able to take people there and show them that and said, to where they'd say, well, what's wrong with this? And there wasn't anything wrong with it. And in fact, I never will forget the Hyatt people that were our flag, so to speak. They thought we were going to be done in 2 years, and we got done in about a year. And they guessed the wrong year from when we started construction, and they were shocked. So it's done that ever since. As you mentioned earlier, the speed is phenomenal, but also the quality and the attention to detail by having everything detailed ahead of time in a 3D model. You don't make mistakes that way. We also incorporated that 3D modeling into our manufacturing operation, where we have lasers throughout our manufacturing plant that people don't have to read plans and drawings anymore. They look at a tablet and control a laser projection of what we're going to build. Don't need measuring tapes and judgments. Anybody that's operated a cell phone can do it. And that's about everybody these days. And so it makes the manufacturing operation more advanced and more efficient. So the use of 3D technology has been wonderful. But back to the hotel, it's a nice thing to have. We decided it was so good that we kept it. We still own it. So
I mean, that was almost like it was. So you've almost built this living showroom, right, to exemplify the technology you had just, that you were still a little bit. You're probably, because it was still R&D for years and years, right?
Yes, it was. 10 years, yeah.
And so this was the POC. This is the proof of concept that, look, we can do it in half the time. The quality is through the roof because we can get it down to the, to the tenth of an inch, in the kind of the factory. That
Right.
is So let's get to R&D for a moment. So wait a minute, at some point in your life, you're like, you know what? There's a better way with AutoCAD and 3D modeling and all these different things. And then you just started investing in research and development? Is that just line in the sand? There's a better way to do it. Let's go pay to get it done. Is that
Like
how that happened?
I envisioned the end product, that dual deck product that's so important to the system. I mean, we were already underway on the 3D modeling, and it required this. I envisioned the end product, but then the problem was, and it took most of those 10 years, how do you make it economical? How do you make it efficiently? And we examined idea after idea of how to do that. And some of it, the concrete technology advanced through those years, the 3D modeling made it possible. There's just a lot of things had to come together. So, and there's also some structural things that were not ever tried before. In other words, they're outside the bounds of normal structural engineering. And so they had to be tested for fire and structural testing. And you just name the test went on and on for 10 years. And so when the time it came ready for market, it was a well-tested product. And we were confident enough to spend quite a bit of money on getting the manufacturing facility built with no current jobs. And so we said, the only way this is going to work is just do it ourselves. And so that was a turning moment in our history.
That's I don't know. You're like, you know what? We're gonna make up new engineering. We're gonna go make up some new everything, and then we're gonna go build a hotel to go make sure it's all cool. That's kind of how I kind of piece it all together. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened.
That's it. Very much it. Yeah. But it was fun. The reason I'm here, Scott, is because, and I'm still here. I'm not here out of necessity. I'm here because I really like it. I mean, no, I love it, I guess would be a better term. So this is why I'm here. And I think we've tried to make the company that way throughout. And this has been fun developing things like this.
You have two sons that are also in the company and they're also engineers. And that's got to be amazing too, to work with your sons like that.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's they're doing great. And like I say, I could walk out of here today and they'd be fine. I do contribute some things, but I'm no longer purely managing by any means. And that's up to them. But I can advise and I can work on some long range stuff that maybe they don't have time for or emphasis for. So and make suggestions. So
let's talk about, just for a second, let's go back to the commoditization of things. It feels like there was a point, you know, and I read through your and Kay's book, and there was a point where you realized you weren't able to compete because everybody was kind of on the same level playing field. Kay said something along the lines of, the moment you have two people of equal capacity, it's commodity, right?
That's correct.
And you had made the decision that it was the consulting or something along the lines of that, if you could actually add value above and beyond just the zeros and ones of the execution, that people would go, no, we're like, can you talk a little bit about that kind of decision to do that?
I mean, this came all the way back from my childhood almost, really. My dad had to compete in a what I'll call unfair market back in those days. And I won't get into that. I don't want to criticize people, but it was not good. And so he had to go off on his own. So differentiation was something that was built into his DNA, I guess, because out of necessity. So I understood all these concepts and knew what I wanted to do, but I have to say, I didn't have the vernacular. I didn't have the ability to explain in technical terms from a strategic marketing point of view how to do that. And I was chairman of the Prestressed Concrete Institute out of Chicago, which is a nationwide representation of precast prestressed concrete through the country. And I was chairman of it in 92. And that gave me some ability to understand others' reasoning in the industry and so forth. And one of my thrusts was to have more of a market focus on our products. And up till that time, it had been highly engineering, highly technical. And so I emphasized that. And I had some kind of a movement, you might call it, of doing exactly that. And I hired Kay Plantis, who turned out to be, she asked me to write a book with her. And we did. And what Kay did, being an ex-professor, she gave me the academic side and the ability to express what I was wanting to do, but would have taken me a lot longer, if at all. And so she gave me that professor type, technical
Vocabulary. I know, but it almost felt like a
vocabulary.
vocabulary, right? Because you couldn't even
Vocabulary.
think about it, conceptualize it, because you didn't have words for it, or you didn't have the synonyms for it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It was very, it was a changing event in the company, because then what I did is this is back, actually, I started before this, but that was 92. I started before that. But we started coming up with some ways to explain it. And, things get better as you go along. You don't pop into the final thing that you ended up with. And so when Kay asked me to help write that book, by that time, then I was getting the vocabulary to be able to explain it. One of the things we did that I think has made a huge difference in the company, that I think is very important, we developed a business strategy, I would call it. And it included all the typical things that business might have, like the goals, strategies, objectives, and all that sort of thing. But it had one more thing that I think came out of necessity, and that was that we came up with different categories of principles. What's a principle? It's a fundamental truth. And this is the way I explained it to everybody here in the company, because you might think you can just be the boss and say, we're doing this, get out of my way. That doesn't create buy-in in a company. You don't get enthusiasm. You don't get enjoyment of your work if somebody's just telling you what to do and not why to do it. And so these principles, we started evolving back late 80s, really. And they have evolved into how we run the company. We have here, I've got a list of them right here on my desk. We've got guiding principles, all the typical things like we practice integrity and excellence, and we respect people, and we knowledge is king. Think about, what are you selling in an economy? You're selling knowledge. You're not just selling a product and service, you're selling knowledge. So that's pretty important. Respecting people is important. And then we went through different areas of principles, like management principles. What do we think of in management? Individual principles, strategic principles. Now, here are the ones that create your right business model for a company. And even operational principles in our manufacturing operations, for instance, or construction side, or architecture, engineering, everything. So once you put these in place, then people start to understand about where you're going and why. And it reduces the necessity of having a bureaucracy to control things. In other words, if somebody already knows that your principles for management are thus and so, they're going to say, okay, well, I can do that. Might even better than something, So you get buy-in. And that's how you get the buy-in. You got to have the vocabulary, like we said a minute ago, but you also got to have the reason why, if you want people to cooperate and not have to be a mandate things. Those kind of companies don't go anywhere. And so those have been extremely important to this company. And I give Kay some thanks for her part in this stuff and explaining the academic reasons behind some of these things. And you get to be where economics, when you think about it, I think it was Elon Musk said this one time. What did he like to do and why did he invent all these things? He says, I like economics and physics. And, I said to myself when I heard that from him, I said, that's exactly what I like. That's what I've been practicing for a long time. What is strategic marketing? It's a branch of economics, and physics. What's physics? Engineering. Engineering is derived from physics, particularly structural engineering. So you put all those things together, and this is how if you want to know in a nutshell, how we got from being a struggling precast concrete manufacturer to where we are today, that's a big part of it.
What's interesting is the principles allow you to set a direction when you're not in the room, right? The principles,
exactly,
right? And so if they're given 4 opportunities, and long as they filter your principles that you came up with, they go, it's that third option is the correct option, because that is the direction that Bob sent. That's the direction that the
Yeah,
Finfrock sent. And everybody just understands. They know.
that's right. It's amazing the difference it makes. I mean, if you don't do this as a company, you're not communicating with your employees. You might think you are, but you're not. You're not doing it at the most important level, and that is the strategic level. This is where you make money in a company.
Well, it's funny. It's also, you talk about that buy-in, but it's almost that the buy-in is almost the understanding of the principles, right? The buy-in is like, okay, great. They're really inalienable truths, right? And
Yeah, yeah. They're a fundamental truth. How do you disagree with the fundamental truth? I've always said that if you want to win an argument or a debate or something, start up at the fundamental truths, the principles, and work your way down to the issue. You come up with a lot better success, and you'll point out some logic hiccups that happened if you don't follow that path.
what? So I mean, can you think of, a conjure up some of the principles that, maybe one or two of them that just they're maybe obvious now, but back when you did it, you're like, I don't even this wasn't obvious. Is there?
Here's one I've known probably all my life, and that is deliver benefits to customers. Okay, benefit is something that they perceive to be important to them. It could be cost, the price, but often it's not. Use differentiation to escape commodity competition. There's probably my number one thing. If you're not different, you're the same. And if you're the same, you're a commodity. And then price is your deciding factor. Okay.
Then everybody loses.
Huh?
Right. When it's pricing only, everybody loses. It's just a race to the bottom.
Exactly. So, well, there's one winner. That's a low cost producer. So if you want to be that guy, and you've got and sometimes that's luck, sometimes it's skill, but there's only one of them in any market. So why? I mean, how are you going to be so lucky as to be that? Somebody else spends more money on their operational stuff than you're not in the number one position. So those are the things. We've got about a dozen strategic principles. So we got about 50 some total principles that we practice in the company, and we push it through meetings, and our people have to expound on those. And it really, I mean, I see it. I go out in our plant and talk to our guys out there. I won't say they have the same understanding that I do of it, but they understand at a deeper level than you might, particularly the supervisor level. They understand pretty well what we're about. And that's why.
I know, but it's interesting. WWBD. What would Bob do? It's my principles. What would Bob do? You don't have to guess. I've already set these almost edicts and these kind of truths about how we're going to run things.
And then you don't have to have all those rules,
Right. And they're already on board. They've already bought in, and they just do it as okay. Yeah, I would like to. Is that list public? Do you have those 50 principles public?
Yeah, we put them out in the company. Yeah.
I'd like to see them. That would be very interesting to kind of get through.
I got a little pamphlet right here in my hand that in case you ask me about it, I've got it sitting right on my desk.
Glory.
And they're that important. Yeah, it's totally different philosophy on how to run a business. And it is so comforting that you don't have to do all that rule setting, because you cannot predict exactly a situation. But I give you the best example. I used to do all the new employee introduction talks, and they would ask, why do people leave here? Why do you get rid of them? Why do you fire them? And I'll say, I would read down some of the list of things. And the one that kept coming up was lack of respect for people. In other words, if you don't show respect for your fellow employee, everybody that you come in contact with, but particularly the fellow employee, if you're the head of something and you don't pay attention to that, then that's shame on you. And they're always surprised that really, and that tears up organizations. When you can't show respect to everyone, then that just creates strife in a company, and it's not good for success.
It's interesting. So lack of respect. You had also talked about the thing you also try to hire for, which is the curiosity. right? And the lack of curiosity is the reason a lot of companies or engineers or architects or any of your competitors didn't make it, is they just didn't have the curiosity to go figure it out for
Yeah.
themselves
Oh,
and
that
find out.
triggers everything. I had to give a speech on that one time, and I researched it very deeply, and I think it helped me. You know, it is when you do a little research. I said this a long time ago, that you realize that what's that saying by Dorothy Parker? Oh, the cure for boredom is curiosity. There is no cure for curiosity. And I thought, oh, what a great quote, you know. And and the reason is that is what creates the incentive for you to get better and to innovate and gain knowledge. Why else should we? I mean, if you're curious, you're going to say, well, how does that work? That's what we had to do. And getting all these dozen or more different companies, we had to, well, what's this all about? Okay, well, why can't we do this? Well, we don't have the knowledge, is the typical thing. And well, let's figure it out. And what we try to do is not hire people that had the knowledge, because they're probably not going to be the right knowledge for a combined business model that we have. So what we had to do is every time we entered a new area, and it was usually out of necessity, if we're going to do this, we got to know this. We had to research it, and through curiosity and learning, we had to figure it out on our own. And figure it out on your own, then you've got a lot of people that are knowledgeable about it, and they're doing it in a way that's consistent with your business model. And so that's been very important to us.
How do you
And
assign that? I'm having to imagine, back in, I guess, the 70s and 80s, you're like, we've got to bring architecture in-house. We have to. So do you assign that to a manager, or how do you do that?
No, you don't do it that simply. What we did is we participate in a lot of design build teams. And that made you realize that we gradually worked there. And that made you realize that they are very inefficient because of that term I used earlier, sub-optimization. Each person in the chain sub-optimizes, and therefore they're looking after their own interest rather than the interest of the real customer, which is the guy buying that building. And so what we say now is we sell buildings, we don't sell services, or which a lot of people do. They because somebody else designed the building. In our case, we have to design the building before we can price it. But we've done so many parking garages, we can come up with a accurate price that has no extras. No, and I'm sure you know what I mean by extras. In a parking garage, we can do that in 2 weeks or so, depending on the complexity, and guarantee a price. And that's the end price unless they change their mind. Can't quite do that as well in a more complex finished building, but we've worked out systems that are fair and know that the customer is not being deprived of value. And because they have to make some of the decisions on I won't say last minute, but in toward the end of the game, they may change their mind. So we can't guarantee that. But as far as we're concerned, having, like in a parking garage, the slight majority of the building materials are a precast prestressed concrete, and we can easily guarantee that. And everything else in the building, we've done so many of them. So anyway, that's one of the values we bring to our customers.
Out of curiosity, how many buildings have you been? I know you probably don't have a running count in your head, but how many buildings is Finfrock responsible for? Wild guess.
God, I don't know. Well, I know it in parking. It's approaching 400 parking garages. The vast majority of those are as a design builder. The early ones were as a precast concrete supplier, but I don't know exact number, but certainly above 350, I would guess, somewhere in there. I think we are the largest in the country, or who knows, maybe beyond that. No, just hadn't. We don't know.
Do you have a product you're like a project that you're most proud of? Like in your brain, do you go, God, every time I see that, I did that? Or do you have any of those kind of projects?
Well, actually, I hate to tell you, but they're multiple. In other words, we did that a while back because I'm preparing. I want this company to go on for a long time. That's my next challenge, and this is why one of the reasons I'm still here is I want it to go on for a long time. And so we prepared as part of the education to my grandkids, which are about to come into business now. I prepared something, Significant Jobs, I think it was called. And we ended up with about 20 some, as I remember. And they were way back, some of them as a precast concrete supplier. You came up with some principle that was instrumental in you doing other things. And so it was a pivotal job, even though by today's standards it wouldn't be, because we've incorporated that into what we do today. But so you'd have to answer that. It would be probably 25 projects that we did. And all the ones since 96 were all design build. Ones before that may have been engineering emphasis. A lot of them were. It's how we got where we are, was by having innovative engineering in the precast concrete products. So that was a lot of it for all those early years. And then it's turned into, oh yeah, I love that building. And so many of the buildings nowadays, while we're doing them, I can't tell you about, because they make you sign NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements. And we just said, oh, we would really love to market this, but
can't do it.
Keep your mouth shut, guys. This is a confidential job and you can't talk about it to anybody. So we get stuck with that. Very frustrating, but these are very valuable customers too. And so we honor that.
I would imagine. So it's just funny because some people will go, oh, that building of Universal Studios, I'm most proud of that. But it sounds like the ones you're most proud of were the ones that like made you turn a corner, like where you did it. Like that hotel would be a perfect example. It was the shining example that it works. The thing you came up with works, and it may not be this, that, or the other, but I'm the most proud of that because of what came out of it.
Oh yeah, I could do that. And they don't like a lot of people, a lot of these type customers. They don't want you to. It's up to they get to say this is my building, and so you got to keep your mouth shut on some of that stuff. And it does hurt. It's hard not to market that. And then sometimes they say, go ahead. Yeah, you can market it now. Go ahead. So, particularly all the ones we've got good cooperative ever, and they realize we kept our mouth shut all that time. So anyway, that is a little frustrating, but it's also kind of rewarding.
Right. So let's kind of finish up with legacy. So your grandchildren are coming online, basically, right? Yeah, your sons work in the company, their leadership in the company. Where do you see this company in 20 years, 50 years, 100, long after we're gone? Will it be around?
I had a big meeting of the grandkids here about a year and a half ago to getting this progress kicked off. So I looked up companies that have existed, private companies, because we don't want to go public. I know what happens to public companies. I've predicted the downfall or the demise, or at least the downhill direction of many companies, particularly studying strategic marketing. You can see it before they see it, apparently. Because, we all know the Eastman Kodaks when they thought they were in the film business. And I could go on and on. And so they don't see the technologies coming on. So a lot of it is technology. So anyway, I looked up for this meeting, age of private companies. And you know what the oldest one is? You'll never guess. It's in Japan, 1,500 years old, family-operated construction company. And so I didn't want to shoot too high, so I said beyond 1,000 is what I told them that we were shooting for. A little bit of tongue-in-cheek there, but who knows? If you said
mentally, but mentally, you're like, we can do this, right? 1,000 years, whatever. I think we've got it in us to do this.
And so we already have come up with the 6th category of principles that we have, which is longevity. And, you cannot dictate the future. You're foolish if you think you can, but you can dictate fundamental truths that are always going to be present. Markets change, for instance. If you don't believe that, just follow my career. That's going to go on forever. As technology advances, you can count on the same not being the same. A lot of private companies get up, or public companies particularly, get up to a level to where they think, oh, it's always going to be this way. No, that's not going to happen. And so things like that you can predict with the fundamental truth, and give them the gift of saying, this is going to happen. These principles are valid. Don't try to go against them. That's what I'm trying to do now, is make this company go on. I don't know why, but when you've worked here, I've worked here 59 years full time, plus some before that. And I don't want to see all this stuff that we figured out go away. That would be horrible. It's not about money. It's about enjoying what you're doing. As that saying goes, if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. And I've been lucky enough to have that come true for me.
Bob, it was an honor to talk to you. I've talked to you 3 times now, and every time I'm always kind of delighted and I always learn something. And seriously, thank you very much for doing this.
I enjoyed it.